Hello and welcome to this audio commentary for Phantom Thread, the 2017 film directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. There's a Focus Features logo that you've just seen, and you'll see something from Annapurna Pictures right now. By the way, you're listening to Omar Moore. Hello there. I am a film critic in San Francisco, California. It is a great pleasure to be here, and welcome to this commentary. So we already hear this sound, kind of this very discordant, high-pitched sound from Johnny Greenwood's sensational score for Phantom Thread. You see the title there. And again, we get to lead into a woman on the screen here. This happens to be Vicky Krieps, the actor. She plays Alma, and she's talking about love. She's talking about feeling. She's talking about someone who she is deeply in love with. And she's explaining to a man off screen that, this person Reynolds, who she's talking about, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, is very demanding. But, she will do anything to keep him and love him. And there is Reynolds, played by Mr. Day-Lewis, who, as you know by now, retired from acting. This was his last feature film, as best I can tell. And he really goes out with a bang here, with a really excellent performance. We see this very fastidious man who is indeed demanding, meticulous. Everything he does, from the way he puts his clothes on, to the clothes he puts on, to the clothes, of course, that he designs, as you will see in this film, is pitch perfect. It really is. Everything is very precise. I love this shot here, the UK flag, and you see Leslie Manville. Leslie Manville plays Cyril. She is the sister to Reynolds in this film, and Leslie Manville has done some excellent work in her fine and illustrious career. And you hear Johnny Greenwood's excellent score, The House of Woodcock, and it plays over these images of all of the people who are involved with the tailoring of clothing, seamstresses, all kinds of individuals who play an intricate and integral role in this designing of these clothes that Reynolds designs and inspects. It's all very procedural. What you see here is ritualization. This film is set in London in the 1950s. So you've just come out of World War II, and so there is this kind of, exhale from that time, or we'll find out perhaps there might not be. And I'll talk about that perhaps a little bit later. But everything is very formalized. You see these shots, you see the procession of women walking up the stairs, and you see Daniel Day-Lewis's character Reynolds walking down the stairs, and now you see inside this room where there's sewing, there's all kinds of precise instrumentations and instrumentalities, putting on their coats. You see the mannequins, you see the fabric that's being prepared and being laid out on the table there. And again, the stitching and the sewing, the stitching. You see Woodcock. There it is. That's the label. And there's the tea, coffee, I should say, perhaps. And these designs. Everything is so precise. You see the way that things are ordered and laid out. I love this moment because this is one of the muses, I think, for Reynolds, and she is trying to engage with him, and he's no longer interested. He's barely making eye contact with her. And it's kind of this preview of what we get to see Reynolds like, and how he behaves with the women that he has fallen in love with, or used as his muse for his designing. And when he's bored of these women, he ends up not even looking at them anymore, barely engaging with them anymore. And so this is kind of a look at Reynolds and his relationships with women before Alma comes into the picture. You see the way the lighting is too. It's kind of this very faded lighting. It's as if the light switch has been turned off with this poor woman who's looking at him, knowing that, she's no longer being looked at as an interest. And you see Cyril with this look here. She knows the story because she's seen it before with what her brother does with women. He's very narrow, shallow, dismissive. I would say borderline misogynistic, and there's a very coldness. There's a coldness to Reynolds here. Anything that is viewed as a woman speaking, as far as Reynolds is concerned, is a confrontation, and that's kind of really beyond the pale that he's calling that a confrontation. It's kind of quite fascistic in a way. And he said it's coming out of the World War II. It seems like there's some lingering things going around. And you see this shot of the woman getting out of the car there, and you see the lighting is much more bright because she's the new muse. She's the new person, or one of the new people. Love how Leslie Manville walks straight into the camera here. Oh, it's a beautiful moment there. You just see there's a lot more gold toned, sepia toned imagery here as this new woman who is being fitted walks into the house of Woodcock, and you can see how Reynolds here is going to light up when he sees the new muse. So she's being fitted here, and he can't wait. He's pacing around. There's the anticipation, and there's Cyril keeping watch, and then she's being fitted into this very tight costume. There's dress. I shouldn't call it a costume. And you see the preciseness. He's just pacing around and waiting, and here she is, the new muse. Absolutely love these designs. A lot of this was modeled after, Reynolds was modeled after Cristobal Balenciaga, if I can pronounce his name correctly. I'm probably botching it. And Cristobal Balenciaga was a world-famous fashion designer. And this is the person whom Reynolds was most modeled after. Let's take it for a walk. I mean, he's not even talking about the woman, he's talking about what she's wearing. Goes to show you. The fashion world, by the way, is quite a fascistic world. I know that some people in the fashion industry would not take kindly to hearing that, but there's a lot of that in the fashion world. There's so preciseness, and there's lots of books and things that have been written about the fashion world in the 1940s and 50s and 1930s through the 50s, and how there's this fascistic kind of undercurrent to some of these fashions. And we all know, some of us know, that Coco Chanel was someone who had a relationship with Nazi Germany, had a relationship with Hitler, as a matter of fact. I don't know if Cyril is a little unhappy there or whatever it might be, but that was an interesting shot. And here's Reynolds going into a pub or a restaurant, I think, and he's walking through, and he is waiting to have dinner, or I should say Cyril's waiting to have dinner with her brother Reynolds, and so they will have a conversation here. And I love the stuffiness of this room. You can see it through the lighting, and Cyril's really her brother's keeper. And she's really the author of this whole situation. She's basically saying, hey, look, you've got to give up on this muse that you're getting on now. She's really past it. She's a little bit overweight. She didn't use that word. I did. And she actually uses a word that's a lot more derisory than the one I've just used. He's being whispered to by his sister. Because she wants this new muse gone. And he's now talking about his mother here, and I think that he's trying to express how he feels. He's not one to talk about his feelings necessarily, but he will start to talk about them a lot more throughout this movie. I hope you've seen the movie, of course. But he's talking about this gravitational pull he feels from his mother, this kind of spiritual energy he feels from her. And she passed away a number of years back, his mother, their mother. But he's talking about this, he says it's comforting that the dead are watching over the living, and he says he doesn't find that spooky at all. She obviously does. Cyril does. That's the way she kind of looks up at him. And she diverts the conversation to the countryside. Why don't you go up there tonight? And with the very start of this film, you hear the music. It suggests there's some kind of haunting, or there's some kind of other presence that's guiding this whole story. And we will, I think, get a glimpse of that later on. I love this, the camera attached to the back of that car for a brief moment there with the kind of blue lights. It looks very nice, kind of still in the early hours of the morning, that kind of transition to morning. And you see it here now again, the car attached to the back of the vehicle there. I love that. That's a really good shot. This film was shot in the English countryside back in 2016, released in 2017. I love how the shot just really kind of stays there where it is. It doesn't go inside where Reynolds is asking for some instructions to be given in terms of his car. I love that. The Victoria Hotel actually does exist. That's a real hotel. It's not a set. I forget where in the English countryside that is, but it does exist for real. So you should go look that up. The costumes are exceptional in this film, and Mark Bridges actually did win an Oscar for this, won an Academy Award for Best Costume Design. It turns out to be the only Oscar that this film won. Phantom Thread should have won a whole lot more Oscars. As far as I'm concerned, it was the best picture of second best picture of 2017. But I watch it, I've seen it a number of times, and I kind of think it may well be the best picture of that year. Just love how Vicky Creeps here, who is blushing as Alma makes her entrance a little bit awkwardly. I love this awakening in Daniel Day-Lewis's character here. He's thinking about something, or something has kind of tweaked him, and he's kind of thinking about whether or not he should have some conversation with Alma here. And he obviously has had a feeling in himself to do just that. And look at the way he's looking at her as he gives out this order. It kind of is a hint of his own personality. He talks about the bacon and the scones, or scones, the butter and the cream. It's all this very orderly and precise ways of detailing out how he wants his breakfast laid out. And she, I think, catches on as well. She's clearly attracted to him. The way they're flirting. I mean, Reynolds is flirting with Alma, and she is probably blushing again here, and then he puts on his glasses. Kind of looks a bit like Cristobal Balenciaga right there when he puts his glasses on. Total flirt. Oh, Reynolds is flirting away like never before. And you see the window there. I like that shot with the window between them there, and Alma is taking care of the. And notice how she pours that. She pours that cup of tea, and he's looking at her with such reverence and design. And that pouring, where she pours it very high like that, is going to appear later on, of course, in the film, as you know if you've seen it. Now he asks her out, and of course this is what he was leading to do, and he made up in his mind that he would. Will you have dinner with me? And of course she didn't hesitate there, because again, that was it. In fact, she had already written this out, this note for the hungry boy, my name is Alma, and she already had designs on him as well, I think. So that note was already there, and she already wrote that note out for the hungry boy. It's kind of this very affectionate way to call Reynolds a glutton. I know I'm probably being a bit harsh, but maybe not. I love how this shot goes at night, how again, that dark blue, that kind of indigo blue this time. And then this shot attached, the camera attached to the front of the car now, to the bonnet of the car, as opposed to the back of the car before, the trunk. And now it's the other way around, and I love this. This is great shot making here. Very nicely done. And we see these different changes in wardrobe as the relationship between Reynolds and Alma changes and evolves. And there's a lot of confidence in the way that these two interact. As the body language is different at the beginning, very open, very happy, and there's a lot of confidence in their movements together, and a lot of, I think, very affectionate moments. Look at this. This is a very intimate moment, quite erotic in a way, really. How he wipes the extra lipstick off of Alma, of her lips there. And you can see the close-ups here. And there's this real intimacy. You can see it. It's very charged with affection, emotion, sensuality. There's a tremendous sensuality about that sequence that you just watched. And you can see that Reynolds is falling fast for Alma. And this is the pursuit that I think happens in the game of love, right? It's not a game, but you know what I mean. The pursuits, men pursuing women or women pursuing men, mostly men pursuing women, because that's how our society has had it for so long. You know, women have been brought up not to be the pursuers. And of course, there's exceptions to the game of love, if you will. There are women who do pursue men, but mostly the vast majority is the expectation is that the man pursues the woman. And here we're seeing this flirtation and this banter, and he's being very open, Reynolds, here, and he's affectionately talking about the kinds of deep secrets and things that he puts in his garments when he designs his clothing for women. And he really goes into some very tender moments about how he remembers his mother and how he really tries to keep her in his memory. He talks about locks of his mother's hair and all these kinds of things that perhaps might creep someone out, but I think that Alma really sees that for what it is and genuinely picks up on her, on his own sense of deep gratitude to his mother and his deep love for her. I love the contrast there of shots, the darkness to the interiors. I love that shot of the mannequin of the body there that you put the clothes on, the designs on. So I just think that's really nicely done. Love that red dress that Alma is wearing. It's kind of I think a scarlet dress. I think these kinds of dresses were a staple of what you saw in the 1940s and 50s. Obviously a very noteworthy attention-getting dress. That's a picture of Reynolds' mother. And of course, if you've seen this film already, and I said again, I hope you have, you will see her appear as an apparition at a point in the film when Reynolds is feeling very ill. I have a feeling that Reynolds makes and designs these clothes as a tribute to his mother. I think that he is deeply in love with his mother, and I think he tries to search for his mother with every new muse that he gets. I think he's searching for his mother, and I think that when he realizes that the person that he has presently as his muse doesn't really fit that bill, or he's tired of that person, he goes on to the next search, on to the next muse to search for his mother again and try to find something in her that resembles or reminds him of his mother. I think that's what Reynolds does. I think he is someone who in some ways has never been able to fully process the loss of his mother. He was probably very close to his mother, and he probably wanted to do so many different things to show his mother that he truly loved her, and I'm sure he got a chance to do some of those, but he never really fulfilled all of that, I think, and I think he's profoundly devastated still by the loss of his mother. I think we all would be. Certainly if we have positive and good and healthy relationships with our mothers, I think we'd all be devastated by that loss, there's no question. And I think Reynolds deals with that by doing what he does as a designer, as a person who really cares about how clothes look, especially how they look on women. And I think that he's trying to show his mother too that he really cares about her in the afterlife. I love how Alma tries to get a measure of who he is. You know, she is obviously very taken by him, as I've said, and she has just talked about how Reynolds is a very handsome man, and you obviously must be around a lot of young women. And she asks him, "Well, how come you're not married?" Da 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 da, etc., etc. And he's convinced that he's supposed to be a lifetime bachelor. He said he's a confirmed bachelor, never meant to marry. But she's studying him here. And I think that she might be momentarily put off by his declaration to be a confirmed bachelor, but I think she wants to try to penetrate this veneer that he has put up. And I think that Alma is very much someone who likes a challenge. And in the 1950s, in an era where women were supposedly seen but not heard, I think that Alma represents a really good challenge to Reynolds, or any other man for that matter, because the 1950s were very conservative in many societies across the world. And really it was about, especially in the West and particularly in the United States, women were supposedly told, no, they weren't supposedly told, they were told to really be seen and not heard. And of course that would be completely outrageous now, as it was then. The difference between then and now is that then it was accepted. It was that kind of male chauvinism and misogyny and sexism were openly accepted by both men and women. I mean, there are obviously women who objected to that kind of heinous kind of attitude, but there were lots of people, men, women, who had no issue with that kind of reductionist and limiting scope of women of any background. This is a very key scene for me. I think that this is this realm, the realm of Reynolds, if I can pronounce that correctly. And that, again, he looks so much like Balenciaga right here. And there's this realm of the world of Reynolds now that kind of is filling Alma, just kind of embracing and enveloping Alma, I should say. And he's fitting her here on a preliminary basis for the design that he's going to utilize for a dress that she's going to be wearing for him. And look at the way she's expressing her responses to how he's treating her and fitting her. She's got this nice smile, and she's still very open and confident, and she's got this knowing look. I just get this view that she is taken by Reynolds, yet she's not intimidated by him at all. I don't think she's ever intimidated by him. I think that she is every bit his equal. In fact, I'd say, furthermore, I think she's a little bit ahead of his time and ahead of him. I think there's this tug of war that goes on when you're in love. I think that, not a tug of war in any violent way, but there's the inevitable push and pull that happens between people in love, people who are finding love, searching for it, journeying through it, navigating it. And you get the bumps, you get the bruises, you get the bit of turbulence, if you will, but you also get the, hopefully more often than not, the joyous moments and the moments of connection, which you're seeing here. And Reynolds and Alma here in Reynolds' world, if you will, this connectivity that's now happening. See how this different dimension of their relationship happens now. She's wearing kind of a white overlay with that sash, the kind of a purple look on the top as a fit for the color, and he's wearing all white. So there's this new phase of their relationship here, and I think the color white, I think, exemplifies this kind of renewing, this kind of blank slate, starting over part of their relationship. You had the part when they were in the study together. She's wearing the red dress, he's wearing his tux. Now, she's been stripped down to this kind of fitting part, and then you've got, of course, Reynolds with his white shirt. So this is a renewed part of the relationship, and now you've got Alma realizing she's part of a triangle, a love triangle, if you will. This is Cyril coming in, and Cyril's kind of got this design, and watch this really weird thing here. She's smelling she's smelling the scent, the perfume. Look, this is really odd. Cyril's barely introduced herself, and she's smelling around the body of Alma's body, and she's treating her like an object. I told you just a moment ago about the 1950s and how women were viewed by men and women. And you've got a woman here in Cyril who's treating Alma like an object, and leaving Alma feeling very naked, by the way, as well. I think Cyril has an effect on Alma. I think Alma is a little bit intimidated by Cyril. That I definitely think is true. I think that's very true, but not by Reynolds. Cyril is down to business here, and she's really being, again, very precise. It's as if she's on an auction block, and I kind of think of enslavement, black people being put on auction and on show, and you've got these people who would be buying enslaved black people and making notations and taking out tape measure and touching them and putting their hands all over them, and that's exactly what happened back then. And you're seeing it again here, and you're seeing how uncomfortable Alma is as Cyril is taking these notes and measurements. And it's just, again, I just kind of go back to enslavement auctions that happened in the UK, that happened in the US, happened in a number of other countries across the globe. And, you would see that where black people would be put on auction like this, except it would be a lot more crude and a lot worse, actually, than what you're seeing here. First sign of tension in the relationship. You can see that she wants to stand up, and he's saying, no, stand up straight. No, not like that, like this. There's the kind of little first sign of tension there. She is completely not going along with this, though. She is very much, Alma is her own person, trapped in the 1950s. And she is a woman, and there were loads of women like this who did not fall for this male dominance and this kind of male oppressiveness of women. And I think she shows this in the way that she responds to being measured up like this, like she's being put on an auction block. He has that smile on her face there, though, Alma. And, she had a little bit discomfort earlier, but now she is, I think, a bit more relaxed. Cyril has just told Alma he likes a little belly. It's very unsettling, though, that scene in some ways, because you've got the brother measuring her and you've got the sister talking about what the brother likes. It's very incestuous, actually. It feels that way. Kind of a little unsettling and uncomfortable. Love this shot here from below. Love the camera positioning. And you see the garment being placed on Alma. And Alma has this little commentary going, as you can tell in the narration, and talking about her impressions. She doesn't have a lot of confidence in her body. She, like a lot of people, a lot of women in particular, because of this standard of beauty that's been Europeanized, that tells every woman in the world that they're supposed to look like a Barbie doll. There's always this natural self-consciousness that happens. And so I think Alma's reflecting some of that in the commentary that she just gave. This is Alma's story. People watching Phantom Thread, hopefully for the first time, you watched it. You may not have realized that. You may have realized it, but this is clearly Alma's story, not the story of Reynolds. It's the story of Alma. You saw it from the very first scene in the movie, and you're seeing it with some of the narration. And of course, you'll hear some of her narration throughout this film. You never hear any narration from Reynolds or from Cyril, because this is Alma's story. And this is how Alma came into this life, this world that Reynolds really, I think in some ways, manufactures, this fashion world that he is a very big part of, the House of Woodcock, which is for the purposes of the film, a very big time and notorious fashion institution, if you will. I love the way that they come into this restaurant, slightly slow motion on the camera, I think. And it's different from the time that he was in the restaurant before. And he kind of came in very quickly. And then this time, the camera looks like it slowed down the speed just a bit. And they're sauntering slowly through the same restaurant that he likes. There's always a threesome, isn't there? It's kind of this, I think, this in-joke in Paul Thomas Anderson's movie here. There's a threesome. And when you marry into a family, you marry the in-laws, you marry the parents, you marry the siblings. That's really true, actually. You marry all of the people in that family, not just the person that you're marrying directly. And so I think the same thing's true in this film with the fashion world that Alma now is part of. She's not just a part of Reynolds' life, she's a part of Cyril's life and a part of the House of Woodcock's life. And, as you know, she will go on and marry Reynolds, and she'll be marrying Cyril too, and all the people who make the clothing for Reynolds. Really is a marriage to the House of Woodcock itself. There's such confidence in Alma. I just love her confidence here. She's surveying everything. In some ways, I think there's this disdain for some of the artifice. Perhaps she may think that there's some artifice here. This lovely shot that you see here with Alma standing in the center of the screen in that lovely dress is going to be reprised at the end of the film, as you will see when the closing credits come. And again, back to what we saw at the beginning, this shot of Alma. She's really narrating this story, talking to this person, and we'll find out who that is at the end, of course. But this story is being told by Alma, as I said earlier, and she's telling the story in hindsight, not in the present day necessarily. Although it could be in the present day, but she's recalling what has led up to what you see at the end. Cyril is always right. Yeah, she gets chided here. Maybe one day you'll change your taste. And then she says, maybe not. Maybe you have no taste. that's, that's, oh, maybe I like my own taste, Alma says. Yeah, just enough to get you into trouble. Perhaps I'm looking for trouble. And then, then Reynolds goes, stop. See, that's the push and pull, right? That's the little push and pull between two people in love. And they are in love. They just don't know it yet. Well, they are. I think they do know it. I love how Cyril dismisses the two women you see in the mirror, being reflected in the mirror there. And you'll see it. Thank you, ladies, for your kind words. Good night. Cyril just politely dismisses them. You dig her up and sew the dress. I mean, but this is how people in that world talk. I mean, because in the fashion world, it's a rough and tumble trade, and there's a lot of inhumane things in the fashion world. There's some great things in the fashion, but there's a lot of abusiveness in the fashion industry, and that continues today in a great real sense, in a profound sense. It really does, and people in the fashion world look at other people as commodities. When you're talking about designing and clothing and wearing the clothing, you know, that happens. There's a lot of that kind of commodifying of women in the fashion world. It's quite disgusting, I would say. It's been going on for many a decade, many a year. I hope it stops, and I hope it stops immediately. I have not very great confidence that it will, but it must and should. Now you see this other dimension of their relationship. Now it's breakfast, and Cyril's not having it with the scraping of the toast by Alma, and obviously that's irritating Reynolds as well. Everything is loudly orchestrated, and what Cyril and Reynolds like is peace and quiet at the breakfast table, which of course Alma doesn't believe in, and there's the long pour again that you will see at the end of the film. And all this movement that really bothers the heck out of Reynolds, and he will tell Alma here that it's very distracting. I think he says it's too early in the morning for all this movement, you know. And you see Alma pushing back again. You're paying too much attention to my movements. Reynolds says it's as if you rode a horse across the room. Yep, it's entirely too much movement at breakfast. Yeah, he's done. He gets up from the table and walks away. Cyril's looking at Alma here. Like, nope, that's not what you do. So she's being initiated into the ways of Woodcock, and she has a bit of scorn and contempt for them. But in a great real sense here, I think Cyril and Reynolds really depend on Alma, because what Alma does, I think, in their lives is reinforce their lives in the sense that her presence there is necessary for them to keep doing what they're doing in this very fastidious and very strict way. And so I kind of think it's a win-win, and I think that deep down they both like the fact that Alma is there, even though she may irritate the heck out of them. Well, that's as may be. And that moment is accompanied by this beautiful score from Johnny Greenwood, which should have won an Oscar. I just thought Johnny Greenwood had a lovely score. It's a deliciously beautiful score from Johnny Greenwood, who has scored some of Paul Thomas Anderson's films before, including the film There Will Be Blood, which also, coincidentally, starred Daniel Day-Lewis. Alma, that's just a lovely gesture. He's put that in the fabric of the dress, and it's in these secret places in the dress. It's a very intimate thing to do, I think, to put a name in there like that and then kind of sew it into the garment and keep it secreted. Is a very, I think it's very intimate and very affectionate thing to do. I love this shot here of Reynolds surveying Alma, and he kind of cocks his head one side. And here again we see another shot of this. His muse has really come alive here for him. And it's, I think, a process of completion for him too. It's that journey of tantalization. By the way, that shot you saw there when they laughed, that's actually at the end of the take. So that was not scripted. That's right at the end of the take, and Paul Thomas Anderson decided to leave it in. I love how she's considering what she's going to do once she enters May I Come In, and I love how she's being playful here. And here comes Cyril up the steps, and there's another facet of the relationship. She's going to close the door on Alma. This is for brother and sister only here. God, it's so incestuous, isn't it? This is really what it was like when you were back in the 1950s looking at the fashions and the preparation for this show that's happening. And so there's just a gazillion things that are going on, and you've got so many people attending to you, and you've got an audience waiting, audience who are taking note of the fashions and reviewing them and just kind of surveying what's on offer. It's like an auction. Again, I just can't help thinking about that. Except it's not nearly as bad as an auction of human beings, of people who are enslaved, particularly black people. Here's a moment to look through the spy hole and look at that. He's looking right at her and she's looking right at him. She knows that he's watching her. Beautiful music score here that you can hear. It's just absolutely delightful. I suspect that almost all of these women are women that Reynolds has had some kind of relationship with beyond being fashion models. He's probably had intimate relationships with some of these women, if not all of them. And they were all muses of the past, if you will. In some ways, I think that Alma's mocking this kind of orderly procession. She's playing her role, but I think there's a slight bit of satirical comment going on there too, I think. The stresses and the stresses of doing all this kind of work, and sometimes it brings out the ugliness in people, and you see that, and he's trying to struggle with that, Reynolds. You can tell he's obviously very demanding, as we know from what we've seen, someone who is a perfectionist. I think a lot of people, I've not worked in the fashion industry myself, but I think a lot of people in the fashion industry would probably call themselves perfectionists. I would think that they are if they don't call themselves that. Reynolds is clearly not happy about something. He's struggling with something, but she can see that, Alma, and Alma's trying to take care of him here, and he allows her to do that. And this is the first time that you see Alma taking care of him. And this is another new phase of their relationship, another aspect of it. Now it's the caretaker role. And you see again this kind of rebirth in the way that the lighting is. There's some darkness in there as well. And this is kind of, again, a new phase of the relationship. Clearly, Reynolds is looking a little bit poorly. You hear this voiceover narration, and you see again, we go back to the beginning. She's continuing to tell the story, as I've said before. And she's recalling saying how tender and soft he is as a person. He's got this one part of him is this very demanding person, and then you've got this tender, vulnerable man. And you do already see, I should say, forgive me, the person that she's talking to, and we'll know who he is later on. And I love the dissolve here. And he's a doctor. You'll see that he's a doctor, or maybe a psychologist or something. But the point is that I think that he's a triangulation for her. On the one hand it's Reynolds, and then on the other hand it's this doctor, who Reynolds will refer to later on as the boy doctor, that boy doctor of yours. So there's this triangulation of relationships. For Alma, it's both Reynolds and this doctor that she's been talking to throughout the movie. And then for Cyril, it's both Reynolds and Alma. And for Reynolds, it's both Cyril and Alma. These triangulations that happen in the film between these parties, it's the way that they get through their lives, get through their work days, and it works for everybody. Now she knows which mushrooms are poisonous. The housekeeper has just told her which ones are. And so Alma is an apt pupil. She knows what she needs to do to get ahead, to get into the good graces of those that she is working with or in love with, and she uses that information to then do the things she needs to do. I think we as human beings do this. I wouldn't necessarily think that Alma's a manipulative person, although one might argue that, but I do think that she's doing what she can. I think it's an act of self-preservation in some ways for Alma to do what she's doing, to get a measure of this world that she's swimming in, and do what she has to do in it to survive. I love the smiles, the kind of tight smiles that they exchange. Leslie Manville is just outstanding in this film, by the way. Really I'm a big fan of Leslie Manville. I love her work, and you just see here how she, I think, with the minimalism and the execution of great acting, like the acting that we see from Leslie Manville, film in and film out, it's just a joy to watch her. I've watched her for a long time, and I just think she's absolutely stellar. I think all three of them here are. Throughout the movie, of course, Daniel Day-Lewis, Vicky Krieps as well. I love the triangulation here. You see it over this table, the triangulation of this relationship between these three people. I love how Cyril puts Reynolds' nose back in joint, if you will, reminding him of who pays for this house that you're in. Don't you go throwing your weight around. And there'll be another moment like that where Cyril just reminds her brother who really is the boss of this. And this is Barbara Rose actually walking up the stairs, looking slightly inebriated. And you see she's having to be helped up the stairs. And Barbara Rose, she's someone who probably is obviously very rich, probably wealthy, socialite, I don't know. She's probably been fitted before, and now this is a new season, and so she is being fitted for another dress. And this is a nice dress she's wearing. I think it's a very nice dress. But you're seeing someone now who I think has lost a little bit of the glamour and sparkle that she had when she had probably in the past come in to get fitted. And you can see that she's a little bit more uncomfortable perhaps than she might have been a few years before. And you see there in the background on the left hand side Leslie Manville as Cyril. I love it. I love how that shot's in there of Cyril in the background. And you see that Reynolds is trying to tell Barbara, look, I'm doing this for you. I need you to cooperate with me. And you can tell that she's very uncomfortable with it, Barbara. And you see the more that Reynolds tussles with the dress and tries to fit her, the more uncomfortable Barbara gets. And you can see it in the way that she's moving her face and her eyes here. He's telling Barbara that his home is at the house of Woodcock, and she's trying to invite him to some kind of soiree. And she's doing this while he's fitting her, which I don't know that that's the done thing, and he probably takes a bit of exception to that, probably finds it rude. But nonetheless, that's what transpires. This is a press conference too. Again, Barbara Rose and her husband and their son, and it looks really kind of awkward and strange. And of course, you've got all these male journalists, all these white men asking questions, which is exactly what it was like in the 1950s, and not all that different now, actually, in some respects, in terms of the way that journalism occurs. And you see Vicky Creeps there, who plays Alma, is just like, what the heck is this? This is a train wreck, and you can see that there's a lot of tension, I think, in this press conference. These questions are quite pointed, and then there's this kind of thing about these people who are doing things, and he mentions World War II and Jewish people, and you can tell there's an element of anti-Jewish fervor going on here with the British press, or with the person that Barbara has married. And of course that's very prevalent after World War II as well as during World War II, the anti-Jewish sentiment, and of course obviously the horrors of Nazi Germany as well, visited upon Jewish people, and also in Poland and various other places of the concentration camps. And you can just kind of smell some of that vitriol against Jewish people being waged in that scene. And now you see, of course, Barbara Rose, who is drunk, who is completely out of it, has to be carried out of there. That dress is really constricting her, and you can see that she's very difficult to carry. I'll put it that way. It's as if that dress is strangling her, choking her. And Reynolds is now trying to chide Alma for expressing her feelings, saying that that dress doesn't belong here. And I agree with Alma. I don't think that dress fits well. I don't think it belongs in the house of Woodcock. And I think that Alma's doing something here that actually can help Reynolds. And she doesn't like the fact that this dress is being used. It's kind of a step backwards for him as far as she's concerned. But he seems to be really cold to what she's saying. He's not really that cold to it, is he? Because he's been convinced by Alma, that has Reynolds, to come in and take this dress. I mean, it's an act of, goodness gracious me, if I would certainly call it borderline. Well, I should probably stay away from my analogy, which I won't reveal here. But this is a very big intrusion in the middle of the night, to come in, commandeer this hotel room, and he literally is going to have Alma take this dress off of a sleeping Barbara Rose. I mean, this is really crude stuff at the very least. And can you just imagine that, taking off someone's dress while they're sleeping like this? I mean, this is grotesque, actually. And this is so weird. Cal, such a weird thing to say. He's blocking the door. And, this is the son of Barbara saying, "Hello, Mr. Woodcock." And he's like, "Cal." It's very strange. Alma is an apt pupil, as I said, and she's saying she can no longer be dressed by the house of Woodcock, not, behaving in the way she does. And now, Daniel Day-Lewis there is carrying this dress, and now he's completely fallen for Alma. They're both a big item here now because she's now part of the family, Alma is. And so the act of taking that dress off is kind of the demanding, requisite practice that I think that Reynolds would have done as well. And I think this is the first time that Reynolds really accepts Alma, not only into his heart, but as a part also of the House of Woodcock. You have high standards here to uphold, Reynolds. You can't have any old person wearing your dresses. Take that dress. Come on, take that dress back. Come on, man. And that's kind of the attitude that Alma had. She takes the dress literally for him, and he's pleased that she's graduated now from the school of Woodcock in a way, and she's now become an advisor, and she's kind of walking up the ladder of power in that House of Woodcock, and she's observing Alma and Cyril. Excuse me, she's observing Cyril and Reynolds, pardon me. Again, this is the story of Alma, and she's glimpsing this world. And just look at the way the camera is on Alma here. You know it. You know that the story is hers. Look at the way she's surveying him. She sees right through Reynolds, actually. And again, she's an apt pupil. She's absorbing and studying everything. And she's doing it with an eye towards what she needs to do, not only to survive, actually, as I said earlier, but also to control, to have a sense of control in this place. She's establishing her place in this House of Woodcock, and she's also establishing the hierarchy of herself within that place. I think this is the first scene that underlines what I'm saying, as you see someone who's very, very much adored by Reynolds, another of the new muses, and she has a certain presence and command because everybody is genuflecting to her. I think she's a member of royalty of somewhere or other, and you can see that Alma takes some real exception to it, probably a little bit jealous. And you see this kind of subtle confrontation that's going to occur when Alma talks to the woman that you're seeing on the screen. Reynolds obviously really adores her, as does Cyril. And she's from France. And you see Alma there looking at what's going on. And I love this score again from Johnny Greenwood. It's so beautiful. And you see that, I forget her, I don't remember what her title is. This particular woman you see here from France has got the being measured in the distance that you'll see in a few moments. You just see how Alma has to now go over here and talk to her. And there we see her again from France. She's got a beret on, I think. I just really love how Alma just lets her know who the alpha dog is here. I live here. She's reminding this woman who thinks that she's got the full attention of Reynolds that you have to come through me. It's just very subtle. It's the kind of thing that you see between some women. There's kind of, for lack of a better word, cattiness that happens, right? And I know I hate to make up sound, sound so, well, however I sound, maybe a little bit misogynistic. I'm laying out that there is sometimes this very heavy animosity between women, as there is sometimes between men. So I don't want to dismiss that. I'm simply saying that there is a distinct tension that you can observe there between Alma and the woman being fitted who's from France. Cyril is aghast here as Alma, who's always center of the picture, like the way she is in that shot you just saw, wants to surprise Reynolds, and everyone knows, including Cyril, that Reynolds hates surprises, and she already has telegraphed and forecast that. And Alma is very strong on her convictions, which is good. I like that. I think it's good when someone's strong about their convictions on things. Obviously, it depends on what those things might be in some cases, but a human being that has a sense of themselves is always a human being, I think, who is intriguing and interesting and in a good way. And Alma is completely dead set on, I'm going to surprise him. I'm going to surprise Reynolds. And, your advice is fine, Cyril, but you can take your advice and shove it. And this is about love. This is the journey of love. And the whole film is about love and about how it's being received, how it's being given, how it's being expressed. And one of the ways that it's being expressed by Alma is to surprise Reynolds, and is to tell Cyril, look, you know what? I have to love him in my way. I have to do that. And Cyril takes exception to it, and she's warned Alma that this is not the avenue to travel down. Alma has got her very strong convictions about what is best for Reynolds. And I love that shot where you just saw the lens, the shot just kind of tighten and go into a blur. I love that with the lens there. But Alma's very clear about what she wants. And again, she's been warned by Cyril that this is not the way to get to Reynolds' heart. But Cyril left the house of Woodcock for a few hours, and now Alma is going to find out that Cyril was correct, because look at Reynolds here. Yes, but what is this? Yeah, he's not a fan of this surprise, and he's asked about Cyril twice now. Yeah, he's not happy here. I love this shot of Daniel Day-Lewis here, though. His eyes completely go into silhouette, go dark, and the lighting is really well done. And again, this is another phase of the relationship. And look at the way the camera is. She's on top of the staircase, so there's a power angle here. She's now on top. He's now at the bottom, and he is looking down, and he's kind of vulnerable in this moment, because now in his own house, he doesn't have any control here in this moment. He is out of control. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I actually mean that in a way that's vulnerable, and he may feel a little bit threatened here. And it's kind of against what we see in the 1950s, this kind of power that this particular woman is holding over him, and he's no longer in control, and his routines are all out of whack now, because again, as Cyril said, he doesn't like surprises. He doesn't like to be taken out of his comfort zone, is another way to really put that. And she can now see, can Alma, that Reynolds is not pleased at all with what he's walked into. Love this costume, this outfit that Daniel Day-Lewis is wearing. Love the color, the lavender color of the pajamas it looks like he's wearing underneath this jacket. It's great. I don't know who put that together. Oh, well, it was obviously Mark Bridges, but I love the combination of color. This kind of olive green, this olive colored jacket with pattern, kind of like a Burberry pattern, with the lovely lavender, looks like a lavender pajama on the inside. I think it's terrific. Love that color, and it works well with actually Daniel Day-Lewis's complexion. Daniel Day-Lewis is explaining here, Reynolds is explaining here, that the woman from France that Alma's asking about, will you make the wedding dress for her? He's giving her a rundown here. I have dressed this woman basically all her life, first communion when she was a child. I mean, so he's giving her the rundown of how this all works. So it's only fair that I, do her wedding dress as well for her. So she realizes that she's way out of joint here. And now she's drinking this wine, this red wine, because she really knows that he's very uncomfortable with this. And now she's uncomfortable as well with his discomfort. And look at the way he's throwing all that salt or pepper, whatever it is, on his asparagus. There's a lot of close up here. You see the way he's kind of reluctantly playing with the butter. A lot of tension here in this scene. Close-ups on him. She's a little bit back in the regular kind of what would be, I guess, a two-shot. But it's only a solo shot on her. Center of the camera here for her. And she susses it out that he is not a fan of her cooking, shall we say. What is this? He's just totally dissatisfied. And she realizes it now, that she's really deep in it. Deep in the mire. I prefer my asparagus with oil and salt. And knowing this, you prepared the asparagus with butter. Now I can imagine in certain circumstances, so being able to pretend that I like it made this way. Look at the look he gives her too. Right now I'm just admiring my own gallantry for eating it the way you've prepared it. That's one of the funniest lines in this film. But I love the response. This is the way that actors play. And she says, what am I doing here? And Alma's saying this because she feels that this is a whole useless enterprise. What's the point of all of this? It just seems really superficial and stupid to Alma. And so Alma's going to let you know how she feels. Credit to her for doing that. And there's their first big argument in their relationship. And she's just letting him know. She's reading him the riot act. Look, I want you. I need you, and I want you to myself. I don't want 50 people around you scurrying around making dresses. And she's trying to say this to him, and he's saying to her, hey, look, this is my life. So there's some insecurities here on the part of both of them, Obviously, Reynolds is very insecure in this moment because he's been challenged, and he also is fearful in some ways of any kind of real commitment, and also fearful of what it is that Alma's doing to him at the same time, while Alma is saying, this is just ridiculous. I've just had it with this bullcrap, and she's telling him that right now. Because she fears that she's going to be erased. She's going to be kicked to pasture like all these other muses. Yeah, she's really challenging him here, and I think it's a good thing. I really do. I mean that genuinely, and not with any patronizing at all. This is the 21st century woman, speaking here. I really think that. This is the 21st century woman telling a 1950s white man that, this is bullcrap. What are you doing, man? And you can see the insecurity of Reynolds here, saying that, are you here to kill me? And, because he's still got the trauma from the PTSD from World War II. I don't know if he fought in World War II, but he obviously tells you there that, are you hiding with a gun to try to get me? Are you doing all these things? And so, there's something deep there for him. all your rules and your people and the money and she's had it. Yeah, yeah, she's had it with this. You know, she's really she's really exploding on him because she knows that this is a metaphor for something else and all this fashion, that there's something else going on. Woo, shit. I think this is the best part of her performance, actually, because she's really telling you, the audience, you and me, that this world that we're watching is just a world that is just so unrealistic to attain and to be happy in. And the formalizations by Paul Thomas Anderson show us this world, but Alma's the one that truly comments on this world that we're being shown. And so we're given this take that might be existing amongst us as 21st century moviegoers, or shall I say maybe 22nd century moviegoers, or whenever you're listening to this commentary, whichever century you are in at the time you're watching it, that this stuff is just ridiculous. How could you live in a society like this? Well, as I've said, the fashion world is very, very insular and very exacting and quite abusive, I say. And so she's commenting on this whole world. She's actually taking a flame to it, without actually striking the match or throwing on the gasoline. Now the poisonous mushroom. Ooh, dear. She's certainly concocting that poisonous mushroom situation. Mortar and pestle there. She has got a dish concocted. This looks very ominous and malevolent, this shot of Alma here, with the circle and the kind of the darkness around it. And it looks very ominous. And that's deliberate, of course. It's like a potion. I don't want to even connote that she's any kind of, well, let me just leave that alone. I think I've kind of made my point. She's not, but it's just, I think maybe the director thinks that Alma is, and I think you understand what I'm trying to say without saying it. Here's the moment that I was talking about earlier, where Cyril will let Reynolds know who the boss is, and she talked about this before with Barbara Rose, who basically financed the place, and now you're going to hear Leslie Manville read the riot act to Daniel Day-Lewis. It's just really funny, but it's also really true. Because really, Cyril's the one who is really in control of things. And Cyril confesses that she has an affection for Alma. Oh, wow. You just heard that. Don't pick a fight with me. You certainly won't come out alive. And that's the truth. The reality is that Reynolds is frightened, is a scared little boy in some ways. I think he's still trapped in that. And I love that shot of Dan Day-Lewis. He's kind of been put down there with the way he looks. His hair is all over the place. And it's true what Cyril says, is that don't you dare pick a fight with me because you won't come out of it alive. And it's true, because Cyril's someone who will absolutely blast Reynolds in a heartbeat. Reynolds now is someone who I think in some ways is still a little boy, and I think Cyril, I suspect, may be slightly older than Reynolds, and I think Cyril is the one who is really the mother of the house, if you will, for lack of a better word, and has been is really the one who I think will definitely put Reynolds in his place. Well, I tell you what, we see Reynolds here looking very off kilter. He is really, I think, in a realm that he no longer controls. I think it's very clear now that he is ill, he's coming down with something, and everybody notices that he is not his usual fastidious self. He looks as if he is about to just collapse here, and we will see him do that in a few moments' time. And you may hear some noise in the background, so I apologize for that on this commentary. And you will see here that Reynolds no longer has the rule of this particular procedure. You know how orderly that we see Reynolds being, and how clear and defined and delineated he is in all his movements and all the orchestrations. But now we're seeing a Reynolds who I think has lost a bit of something, and I think Alma is observing him in a different way. And we see now how Reynolds is looking very sweaty, and he's about to completely lose balance and lose equilibrium, and probably lose a bit of perspective as well. And this is the wedding dress that is being designed for the French woman whom Daniel Day-Lewis's character Reynolds has been designing clothes for since she was a little kid. And here's that moment where he collapses. So Reynolds is sick. He's obviously ill. And how did he get that way? Well, we know by now how he became ill. Again, I hope you have seen this movie at least once before you listen to this audio commentary. Otherwise, it's going to be a big spoiler for you. I think here now that Alma, I think, gathers the lay of the land, and clearly has set out her stall and is gaining an advantage now and leveraging her own entry into the hierarchy of this house of Woodcock. And I love how these two women are explaining, at least one of them there is explaining about the dress being ruined. I think both of them, I think, are real life people who designed clothing, or were seamstresses, or people who designed and arranged clothing. So it's not as if they are just acting, they're actually really a part of that world. Now, when Alma told Cyril a few minutes ago that I have to have him in my own way and I have to love him in my own way, this is part of that journey. That's part of the declaration here. And that's what she's doing here. You know, this kind of rejuvenation of Reynolds at this moment of his greatest weakness. I mean, he's extremely vulnerable here. Obviously, he's sick, he's not well, he's no longer in control. And that idea that men have to be in control of everything, you know, it's a very patriarchal and chauvinistic and very sexist refrain. And we're seeing here that no, men are not always in control, including powerful men. And I think you can then ascribe that to all kinds of fantasies that some men and women have who are in power, who want to be controlled in a sexual way, or in a way that takes power away from them, because power for them, while fulfilling in their work lives, becomes very banal at some point, and they want something different in their lives. So in an aspect of their lives, they want to be dominated. So then it starts to get into this kind of BDSM situation, this kind of kink, if you will. It's BDSM, you know, this kind of idea that people like to be dominated or fantasize about it, or people like to be in control and fantasize about that. And I think that some of this, in a very kind of delicate way, becomes, you know, a soft core advertisement for for that kind of thing, you know. And in the fashion world in the 1950s, I mean, there are all kinds of things going on, as there still are, where you've got all of these power trips and relationships. Some of them border on this kind of BDSM kick, if you will, or on something else. You know, it's just another way to frame this. And again, there's this incestuous triangle here, because Cyril on one side is trying to find out what's going on with her brother, and then on the other hand, it's, you know, Alma is sitting there too. So both of them are kind of competing for for Reynolds' attentions and affections. And it's a voluntary love triangle. This is not something that is a surprise to any of these three people. They are both, all three, I should say, are all very content and consenting to this kind of intersection, if you will, between these three. They are all very content to this kind of menage a trois, if you will. And it's the way that these three people exist in this very strict fashion world that they're in, high demand, high pressure world. This is how they survive, all three of them, with this kind of tango that they do, this kind of menage a trois that they do. And it's a necessary thing for all three of them. And it's a game that they're playing, but it's a game that they like and they're very comfortable with, including Reynolds, by the way, who at the moment, of course, in this particular scene isn't very comfortable, but it's part of what they've all signed up for, including him. And I think deep down he knows that he can't really go on in life if this isn't a part of the ingredient of what his life is. A very close up there, very close up shot there of the dress. Kind of very sensual too, because you see the way the bust is protruding, and they need to fix this dress. So all of the women who do the designing and the seamstress work and all the arrangements and all the other things, the measuring and sewing, have to really hop to it and get to stepping. And so you see this very procedural, orderly focus again after we've seen the disruption of the three major characters' lives, the main character's life, and then the other two characters reacting to that. We now see this orderly process again of the seamstresses and the other arrangers there laying out all the table and all this other stuff. I like how that contrast happens. It's this tension that goes on between what they're doing and what's going on with these three people, where you've got the fashion lord, if you will, in Reynolds being completely out of his element, sick, and then you go back to the women arranging things and they're just so orderly. It's kind of this life goes on at the House of Woodcock, while at the House of Woodcock, in the very same part of that house, or another part of that house, is this kind of disruption in the life of Reynolds, and then the way that these two women are in some ways attending to his disruption. And I love how, again, that contrast with what we're seeing here, with this orderly look at how the women here are preparing this fabric and trying to stitch it up and replace the stuff that was on that dress before that got damaged. I love this shot here between these two women. This doctor, now we're going to start to see this doctor, and there's this tug of war between the two of them. And you know, Cyril says that Reynolds needs to be examined, and Alma's saying no, no, we don't need that here. And Cyril is just going to just read the riot act. And I love the way that Cyril just looks. Leslie Manville, the way she's just looked at her there. It's just perfect. And this is the same doctor, the boy doctor, as you will hear referred to by Reynolds later. This is the doctor, Dr. Hardy. This is the doctor whom Alma has been speaking to throughout the entire movie. And you saw a brief glimpse of him earlier, but now we see him on the screen in full, in real earnest. And there's a triangle for him. You know, there's a triangle for him that he's now involved in too. And you see it there. Look at that triangle. Look at that shot with the three of them. Love that shot. But the real triangle is going to be him, Dr. Hardy, that is, Alma, and Reynolds. And you'll see that near the end of the movie. That there's this kind of existence that they all depend on. It's kind of this codependency in some ways. And again, this is the entry point for the Doctor, but he's really been a part of the story from the beginning, because, as you know, Alma's been talking to him all of the story, all throughout this film, about these people that she immersed herself in, with, and amongst, and around. I love how this Doctor is talking to Reynolds, and Reynolds is being very, very rude to him. And he just cursed at the Doctor, telling him to fuck off. And Alma repeats it too. The doctor's call is not welcome. The doctor's house call is interrupted very, very quickly and terminated, and so he's gone. And Alma wins here. It's kind of this little battle going on between Alma and Cyril, and the doctor's now ejected from the place and is seen to the door, seen out, and Alma's kind of a kind of there's either a triangle again between the three of them. Look at the way that shot in the mirror or between those railings there. You can see it, like the triangular thing here. And again, it's willing. I mean, the doctor's willingly a part of this. He knows what's going on, and the doctor, we'll see that later when he becomes a triangle with Alma and with Reynolds. He is a willing participant in that. You can make a case that all of this behavior, with the exception of the taking off of the dress and the early parts of it, of the movie where Alma's being measured, you can argue that everything in this movie is entirely consensual. These triangular relationships between these people. It's all a part of the artistry, not just of the film, but of the relationships of these people. There's an artful way in which they carry themselves. And so all of it is very geometric, the triangular shape, the ways that the fabric's being sewn, the arrangement of these human beings in a room, the way that the filmmaker, Paul Thomas Anderson, positions them in the frame. All of it, every part of this movie, from the direction to the participation of the actors to the arrangement of the characters, script supervision, all that is very geometric and mathematical. If you look at a script supervisor's job, you will see, and it's typically from a she, a very detailed accounting and calibration of scenes, of dialogue, and it's very mathematical, and it's been chopped and segued, and it's given notations and numbers. It's fascinating stuff. If you're a script supervisor, you know exactly what I'm talking about. She's taking a kneel here, Alma, and I think she's going to sew something. And it might be something into the fabric. And so she's going to sew in something. And I think we'll see what it is that she's sewing in. Yeah, here it is. Never cursed. And you can see it there again. And that's actually what I think Reynolds had put in there for the French woman who is getting this dress, this wedding dress fitted for her. Now we're going to see the moment where Reynolds' mother appears. And there she is. I don't know if it's true that when you're sick or when you're very ill, you get to see people who've passed away. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't think I've never experienced seeing those who I've known pass away come back as apparitions in this way. But in this film, certainly that has happened with Reynolds, because Reynolds is so deeply in love with his mother, and he's seeing what is an apparition of his mother, and he's not sure whether it's real or not. And I guess when you're ill, when you're sick, you don't know. You can't tell what's live and what's Memorex. I think here Reynolds is really a little boy again. He's kind of reliving these moments with his mother, and his mother kind of is there, and he's talking to her as a little boy who misses his mother, who loves his mother dearly, and he really has these deep feelings, and I like the way that it's done here. A man expressing his feelings about his mother, and he is talking about when he was really a child, I think. And as a child, I think he felt helpless. couldn't really express his feelings or his emotions. But now in this part of his life, he's able to. And Alma walks in. Of course, Alma cannot see what Reynolds sees. And so I love the way Alma just walks past. And obviously it's good acting from Vicky Krieps. But you can tell that his mother is visiting, this apparition and visiting Reynolds. And Reynolds is just sitting there and he just beholds this moment. Real close up on Alma there. I think it looks as if Reynolds is kind of haunted here, or maybe not. Maybe he's just so deeply moved that he is trying to take stock of this moment. I think Alma has a complete control here over Reynolds. Reynolds really does rely on her now. Alma leaves. Now he looks a bit more serene and peaceful here. The dress is ready. It's been made. It's complete. The repairs have been done. The alterations done. And that dress looks even more splendid now that the light is really hit it. It looks absolutely gorgeous. He's sauntering over slowly. And he's sitting down. And we can see that there's someone there. And it's obviously Alma. It looks as if Reynolds has been reborn. And it's this sense of purpose again that he finds. He's seen this apparition of his mother. He's been ill, and now he has this new lease on life, I think, in a way. Now, Reynolds is asking Alma for her hand in marriage. And Alma does not answer right away, which I think is quite good because it kind of takes the sting out of what Reynolds is trying to do, trying to propose, and she's really slow to it, but deliberately so. I just think that there's a really interesting thing going on here between them because I think that they both realize that Alma is significant. Alma is changing the way that Reynolds behaves in some instances, and so much so that he's now, again, he's asked for her hand in marriage. And again, as I say, Alma doesn't really respond immediately. So he has to ask again. He's waiting for the answer, and he's like, what the bloody hell are you thinking about? So he's had to ask a third time. I love the way that Alma prolongs this moment. And she wants to marry him, make no mistake. And I like the way that she asks Reynolds, will you marry me? You know, I love that because again, it shows you this ability to give back and then to assert herself as she does, Alma. And here's their wedding ceremony. After all, it is you who are marrying and not me. Love how the camera pushes in on them both. There's another triangle, you know, the priest or whomever that person is there. I don't know if it's a priest, but he's marrying the two of them. So they're married and they look like they're very happy. You've got the familiar others there sitting around the same restaurant that they love to go to and dine in, and there we go. You know, that is that. Yeah, that still bothers him. You know, the slurping of the food and the soup or whatever it is, or the cereal, and that still bothers him. That's what love is, though. You learn to accept the habits of your partner or your spouse or whomever that you really can't stand, but it's just one of those things that you have to take with the rough and the smooth when you're with someone. There are going to be things about you that annoys them, and then there are going to be things about them that annoy you. So that's just part of the deal. That's the package deal. I love that Alma is going on this skiing trip, and Reynolds is quite content to stay behind. I love this tune here that you're hearing is Daydream by Billy Strayhorn, one of the legendary um, pianists and jazz people in the world was Billy Strayhorn. Just absolutely delightful, lovely. It's one of my favorite tracks from him. It's called Daydream, and it plays here at the beginning of this scene, as you can hear. Really lovely. And here's the doctor again, Dr. Hardy. There's that triangle again. Didn't I tell you to fuck off? And then Dr. Hardy says, yes, you did. And again, there's this hint of, even in that scene, there's a hint of eroticism, there's so-called homoeroticism between these two men as well. Because again, they both know what the game is here. There's a protocol and a procedure. Everything that these people do in this film is governed around protocol and procedure and what kinds of things need to be arranged. And so there's an arrangement going on here too. And so we can see that very clearly with this doctor. See the doctor there right next to Alma. And so he's chatting her up. Alma just takes real care to include her husband there, aka Reynolds, in these conversations that the doctor is having. Because this doctor, Dr. Hardy, is obviously making a move on her, and he's flirting with her right there. And Alma looks really lovely in the lovely dress that she's wearing. Her hair is up, and she obviously is very confident, beautiful, and very alluring, if you will. And he's totally is hitting on Alma. And then you've got the other woman there saying, "Oh, she's not looked at you all night. She's barely looked at you." It's all a game. It's all a game here, I think. In some ways, I really do. I think they're playing backgammon. I'm not sure. Now Reynolds is really irritated. He's denigrating Alma though, and I don't care how irritated you are. It doesn't call for that kind of behavior, and so I think that she's had enough of this kind of nonsense. And even though she is losing this game, he's absolutely laying it on thick now. And there's the doctor in the background, and so Alma's had enough. And then have fun with your next opponent. And I think that Reynolds is being very nasty to Alma here because he's obviously irritated. Again, it doesn't justify his behavior. It's simply that Reynolds is kind of talking about certain things that make him seem like an idiot. She says, this is the woman saying, "I don't mean to be racist, but whenever someone says that, whether it's in the 1950s or now, they do mean to be racist." And so that's what she is being in that moment. She went on to say some other things in there. If you listen carefully in the background, you hear there's some chatter about colored men. And so there's this racist overtone going on in the on the radio. 1950s was full of all of that, and certainly hasn't left yet. Now Alma is presenting a proposal to him. She wants to go out. It's New Year's Eve, and he doesn't want to go out. She wants to go out dancing, and he doesn't. And he says he wants to go to work, and he's going to stay doing that. She's going to leave and leave him there, and that's what's going to happen until, of course, we find out what happens during the party. But this is what happens too when you're in a relationship, in a marriage. Sometimes there's things that you want to do that your partner or your spouse doesn't want to do. Sometimes there's things your spouse or partner wants to do that you don't want to do. And so this is what happens. It's this familiar push and pull. I think we've all been in this situation, I'm sure, that you've wanted to do something and then your partner has not wanted to, or your partner has wanted to do something and you haven't. You've just not been in the mood for it for whatever reason. So this is something that's very identifiable to anyone, I think, who's ever been in a relationship of any kind. It's an odd stance from Daniel Day-Lewis, but the way the camera's put forth, it looks like it is, but it's... He realizes, does Reynolds, that this house is so empty without Alma in it. Now what we see here is Daniel Day-Lewis's character, Reynolds, has now gone to this party that Alma wanted him to accompany her to. And there's a lot of dancing and frolicking. This is exactly what Alma wanted Reynolds to come to with her, but he didn't, and now he realizes he needs her, and he's lonely without her, and so now he's taken to this measure of now going to the place where she is, and he's trying to spot her. As we see Alma here in this crowd of people, she's jumping up, she's very happy. There's someone next to her in a gorilla's mask on, and this is clearly something that she's wanted to do. She has a lot of joy, so unbridled the joy. It's not this strict behavior that she's accustomed to in the House of Woodcock. And now Alma has Reynolds has spotted Alma, and he's now going to try to pluck her from safety, to safety, I should say. And we see Reynolds just traipsing through this crowd of people who are just obviously drunk and just all over the map. He's trying to find Alma, and there he has found her. She's listening to what he has to say. And the music just plays over this moment. I just love this score from Johnny Greenwood, I know. Have I told you that already, that I love this score? Oh, it's irresistible. Absolutely irresistible. Thank you, Johnny Greenwood. Cyril is absolutely, I think, reading the riot act again, but very calmly. Or just really listening, I should say. Not reading the riot act, but listening to Reynolds, who Reynolds looks defeated here. Because he has now had information kept from him, and he is trying to respond in a way that best expresses how he really feels. And I think between the two of them, I think Cyril's the grown-up here. As I've said this before, I think Reynolds is a little boy in control, in power. But he realizes he doesn't have the control. Some really funny stuff here from Daniel Day-Lewis. He's just a really good actor, isn't he? He talks about how his feelings have been hurt, and he's expressing that ability to express himself and his feelings, and he knows exactly what that is. I love how this close up here on Cyril. I don't want to hear it because it hurts my ears. This is really good stuff from Leslie Manville. And he's really been humbled here by Cyril. Reynolds just kind of doesn't know what to really say. I love this shot here. Kind of reminds me of Persona. This shot, the split shot of the faces. The film Persona by Ingmar Bergman. And he doesn't know now that Alma's right behind him. There's a real outburst. You just heard that. And he's been talking about Alma interfering and throwing him off. He can't work. He's in love with this woman, Alma, and he just gets exploded by Alma herself, and then he just snaps at her. He's quite monstrous, Reynolds. I get the feeling that he is a misogynist and that he's quite monstrous as a person, but he's also quite a very vulnerable and caring person as well. But it's just, in these times, he's rather petulant and very narrow. And I think that Cyril is someone who wakes him up out of some of the kinds of naive or very juvenile behaviors that he might exhibit. So each of these characters has some sense of either, I would say, codependency, perhaps. I did mention that earlier. But each of these characters exists for the other characters in this film as a necessary, I guess, crutch for them to conduct the kinds of behaviors that they're able to do. Here is this other phase of the relationship, or I guess it's a continuation. Again, you've got this kind of smoky kitchen where the diffuse light, it looks kind of faded light, maybe a little bit monochromatic in some ways. And you can see how Daniel Day-Lewis's character, Reynolds, is slowly turning the page of the book that he's reading. You've got Alma in the kitchen there. Vicky Creeps is Alma, and she's in the distance there, and she's kind of looking around at some of the things that she needs to make whatever it is she's about to make. I think it's an omelet. And so you can see the butter there, and you can see, if you can see beyond the eyeglasses, you see Dan Day-Lewis peering right through those glasses. And I think he knows what's going on here. He's got a slight smile, almost a smile. He almost allows it to come across his face. And watch her here, like a slight smile here too. And there's the butter, and I think there's some mushrooms in there. And you can see how these things are beginning to manifest themselves again. Some of these things that are going on in this film. And again, it's all about arrangement. This whole film's got these arrangement pieces. Look at this, the design of the dress that it looks like Reynolds is sketching there, and then while he's sketching that, you've got a recipe and a dish being designed, if you will, concocted by Alma. So there are always these dual competing industries going on. You know, as I said earlier, when Reynolds was sick, there was a lack of control, and then that was juxtaposed by the women who were trying to remake the dress that had been damaged, and there's this contrast. And now you've got the design that's being drawn by Reynolds in that book, and then you've got the ingredients of this omelet that is being made and has been made by Alma. It's that all of these kinds of things are interwoven. Here we go with a pour. Look how long that is. I think we'll see another of those. Look how long this is. You can tell that there's parody going on here. Look at that. Because when she first did this when she was the waitress in the restaurant, and it was not as high, and now she's doing it here, and it's way over the top, and it's funny. It breaks up the tension between them, and you can tell there's a game going on here, and Reynolds is willing to play it. And so this is completely different from, of course, the first time that she surprised him. When she surprised him, of course, in that first moment, and he was furious at her. And now, now that they're married, though, there's this understanding going on. And look at how he's performing this ritual. And it's all playful. And she's this very wry look. I think that this acting here is so good from both of them, especially from Vicky Krieps. He's just slowly considering each bite and each chew of the food, the omelet that Alma has made for him. And Reynolds is there slowly. Is that smile going to come across his face or not? And she's got a smile that's barely come across her face, and she maintains this poise while Reynolds is slowly chewing. I want you flat on your back, helpless. This is the reveal that you're about to see. This is love. This is the way to a man's stomach, right? Except in this case, it's kind of perverse. It's the way to a man vomiting through his stomach. There's a smile. Love this scene. Suspense. Kiss me, my girl, before I'm sick. And that's exactly what Alma does. And this is the game they play. This is the dance. This is the routine. This is how they find love. And then, of course, to many people, including myself personally, I would find this to be really problematic, to say the very least, very perverse, and quite masochistic as well. Maybe there are persons perhaps who like this kind of thing, this kind of masochism, or any kind of it, but there you go. It works for them, and as long as two people are consenting to this kind of behavior, however distasteful that you or I or neither of us might find it, that is what works for them in the contours of their relationship. And consenting adults will do things that perhaps might confound you or me, or again, neither of us or both of us. And this is the way they find love, is to make one another, or at least Alma make Reynolds as sick as a dog, so that he can then become vulnerable and be taken care of by Alma. So there's a power trip going on. There's this feeling of vulnerability, and then there's this love that kindles out of that. And here's the boy doctor, if you will, that Reynolds just described. See, and now she's recalling this whole thing to him again here. There he is. He's kind of getting turned on by it too. Look, you can see it. There's the triangle again between the doctor, between Alma and Reynolds. And there you go. This is part of the triangle again. And you see it this time, he's examining him. It's all this procedure about his personal life, about their personal relationship. And there's this procedure in that creates this kind of threesome. They're constantly having these threesomes, in their relationship. And look, it's all a game. It's all part of the love. It's all part of their rhythm together, And the doctor knows it. He's a part of it, and they get turned on by it. And that's what they do. It's their routine. And here again is this beautiful aspect to the wonderful score. It's that kind of reprise of The House of Woodcock by Johnny Greenwood. Lovely. Oh, the narration as well from Alma. Here's a threesome as well, again, and now you see the child that Alma's brought into the world. I think Cyril's actually very happy with Alma. See, look, right there, there's a feeling of contentment for her. Because I think Cyril looks at Alma as a project, as her quote-unquote baby, for lack of a better term. And she's pleased with this project. The Project Muse has worked well for Cyril on this occasion. And now, again, Alma's talking into the future or present about the relationship she's having with Reynolds and with Cyril. And she's talking about it to the doctor, who may have excised himself from the triangulation of the relationship. I don't know. Maybe she's visiting the doctor not for any sense of healing about Reynolds, but maybe for a tryst. I don't know. You could interpret that a gazillion ways. Or maybe she's just talking to him and telling the story. Maybe the doctor's become a married man now and she's talking to him. I don't know. Maybe they're cheating. Who knows? It's an open relationship. It might be, this ethical non-monogamy that we have in the world, that's part of a lot of people's lives. Love that shot there of Daniel Day-Lewis his face cradled in the arm of Alma, played by Vicky Krieps. And here's the reprise of the shot that I talked about earlier of Alma in the dress being measured. And there is Phantom Thread. What a lovely, beautiful film. I love this film so much. It's an exquisite work from Paul Thomas Anderson. You see his name there on the screen. And then we see the actors, Dan Day-Lewis, and we see Vicky Krieps. And then we see Leslie Manville coming up here. And lovely, lovely tune from Johnny Greenwood. It's just so beautiful. There's so much elegance in this film. I didn't even really talk about the elegance of the film. The elegance of the way people move around in the frame. The elegance, obviously, of the score. The elegance and loveliness of what we see in front of us. The food that gets laid down, the way it gets cut and dissected, and the way that the utensils are used. It's just absolutely magical. There's Mark Bridges, who won the Oscar for this film. Love this score. If you ever get a chance, go and listen to this score in its entirety. It's beautiful. I think in some ways, even though you hear it in this film, you really need to hear it isolated because it's so good. Lovely, lovely stuff from Johnny Greenwood, who again should have won the Oscar. There's Brian Gleason. He's actually the son of Brendan Gleason, and I could tell the resemblance there. Brendan Gleason, of course, is a fine actor in his own right. And we see the roll call of these credits of the cast in order of appearance. This is a film that, I really think this film is so much better than some people have given it credit for. I'm a big fan of this movie. I think it's Paul Thomas Anderson's best film. I don't think he's done anything as good as this. And in some ways, this might be the most conventional film he's ever done, in a way. It doesn't have a lot of the uh, idiosyncratic devices, I think, in some ways, of the characters, at least, the idiosyncratic devices of some of the characters that Paul Thomas Anderson's chronicled in his filmmaking career. Certainly doesn't have that of the Boogie Nights film or of the film Hard Eight that he did, his first feature, or of Inherent Vice that he did as well. It's a film that stands alone, and it's a film that I think really marks the maturing of a director like Paul Thomas Anderson. It's not that he was immature, I'm just saying that his growth as a filmmaker comes with a film like this. And sometimes I think filmmakers can grow through the most conventional works that they do. I think that's where you sometimes mark that growth rather than through the more distinctly personal or maybe independent types of work that they do. Even though those works are important and are signature and endure, I do think sometimes you can find the measure of where a filmmaker is by the kind of work that that filmmaker does that might be a bit more conventional to the taste in terms of filmmaking. And I think this one, for Paul Thomas Anderson at least, marks that particular growth and evolution, and the ability to take on things that are outside his comfort zone, perhaps. I don't know if this was one of them, but if you look at some of the other films in his repertoire, they do not resemble Phantom Thread whatsoever, and Phantom Thread certainly does not resemble those types of films. I really do love this film. I've seen it so many times, saw it lots of times in the theater when it was released in 2017 into 2018. And I think this film stands for a lot of different things. There's an atmosphere of what goes on in the film outside of its own House of Woodcock. There's, I think, this post 1940s, I think there's still this fascist fervor that goes around in the movie. It's on the edges, but it's there. And the hints of, or glimpses of racism and the sentiments of some of the characters. But this very tight ship that's being run, it does have that kind of overtone of this kind of fascist overtone. I also think, though, that there's a lot of love in the film, even in people who may be broken in some ways in this movie. Some of the characters, there is a degree of love and yearning and power trips that go on in the fashion world and in people in general, and this feeling of wanting to have control and wanting to dictate where love goes. I love it, and I love the songs being put up here, the music that's being put up here. Really, you should track this music and track it down and listen to it. Daydream by Billy Strayhorn, who performs it there, and Duke Ellington, who was one of the writers there of it. I love this score. Oh gosh, it's so beautiful. And Phantom Thread is a beautiful movie. And I must say to you that I really had a great time running through this movie with you for 2 hours and 10 minutes. I hope you enjoyed listening to me do that. I hope you enjoyed the movie as well, of course, and perhaps even more so. But the fact is that I must say I am truly grateful for your listening ear over the last 2 hours and 10 minutes. This has been the audio commentary for Phantom Thread by yours truly, Omar Moore, a film critic here in San Francisco, California. It's been an honor to do this, and I hope that you enjoyed it, as I said, very much indeed. And Phantom Thread, keep watching it, and it's a lovely movie. Be well and take care of yourself, and be good. and keep watching the movies. And don't forget, keep loving. And what a tribute to Jonathan Demme this was as well.